South American football show. The Copa Libertadores is back. We have had 2 rounds of football. We have defined our quarterfinalists. We're going to be talking about the games. And I'm delighted to say this week I am joined firstly by Tom Robinson, Mr. Argentina, Mr. Copa America champion. How do you feel, Tom?
Yeah, definitely still buzzing about the Argentina Copa America result, and I'm glad that I've got that because it's not been a great week for Argentinian clubs in the Libertadores. So I think we're probably going to have to rename this the Brazilian football show rather than the Libertadores show. But yeah, all good, and looking forward to discussing this interesting round of fixtures.
Yeah, but there's not just Brazilians, Tom. It's not just Brazilians. There's also a Paraguayan, maybe 2. Probably not, but at least 1 Paraguayan. So I'm delighted to say we're joined as well by Ralph Hanna, who's a big focus on Paraguayan football, knows loads about South American football. So Ralph, welcome back.
Hi, Simon. Hi, Tom. Thanks for having me back. Yeah, we don't have quite as many representatives as Brazil, but we do have as many as Argentina, I think, in the next round with Olimpia doing the business.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to find out what went wrong for Argentina. Finally, some bad news for Argentina after all this Copa America chat. So I'm delighted to bring some bad news to Tom. Talking about bad news, Tom, let's start with Boca Juniors against Atletico Mineiro. Probably the game that had the most headlines this week. Tom, what happened? Why is everyone talking about this game? Mineiro, Boca, no goals. What's all the drama?
Yeah, I mean, obviously Boca always attracts a lot of attention, but it's certainly not for the events on the pitch, shall we say. 2-0 all draws and then a pretty dramatic penalty shootout. But it was certainly more about the controversy of some questionable VAR decisions, which we'll get onto, but also a bit of a good old fashioned Libertadores scrap at the end with, Marcos Rocco picking up a fire extinguisher and punching security guards, and it all kicking off basically. I think Briasco was running around with an iron bar. It's all the maybe stereotypical things that you kind of expect from a high stakes Libertadores match with a decent dose of controversy thrown in there. So yeah, that's obviously what's taken the headlines. But I think generally, if we kind of look at the match, it's I was expecting Mineiro to comfortably beat Boca, even though Boca is such a big name in this competition. They've got a very depleted squad. They've not really had a run up to it. They've coming into this fixture cold. Tevez has left, Andrada's left. The new signings don't really fill you with much confidence. You've got 2 young guys at fullback who haven't really got much experience. So the fact that Boca probably can feel, I'll let you guys be the judge of whether they should be rightly or wrongly feeling aggrieved, but the fact that it came down to a penalty shootout and they had a VAR decision rule out a goal in each game, they're definitely thinking they're taking the moral victory there. I guess you could call it, even if it did end up with them camped outside a Belo Horizonte police station overnight while 8 of their players were giving statements. So I mean, I guess we could probably start with the first of the controversial decisions. Basically, in the first game, a cross came in. It looked like a pretty standard, albeit poor, headed clearance by the Mineiro defender, and then Gonzalez won the header, and again making the Rever look pretty weak in the challenge and headed in. But then the ref gave it. He went to the monitor and it looked like he gave it for a push in the back by Briasco. I mean, one of those ones that I think when you watch it in slow-mo, it makes it look a lot worse. But in real time, there really doesn't seem to have been that much of a push. Personally, I wouldn't want to see my centre-backs eased off the ball so easily. I mean, for me, contact doesn't necessarily mean that it's a foul. You're kind of expected to, deal with a little bit of that. So for me, out of the 2 Boca VAR decisions, that was the one that I think they should feel most aggrieved about, because the one in the second game looked... it was a very marginal call again, because a ball came in, Gonzalez involved again. He sort of went to try and get on the end of it, and the goalkeeper Everson came out, spilled it, and then Wygant, the young right back, managed to sort of get the ball into the back of the net, but it got pulled back because Gonzalez was fractionally offside when the first ball came in, and he obviously challenged the goalkeeper even though he didn't actually touch him. So I suppose if you're looking at it from a referee point of view, does that goalkeeper make that same decision if he's not put under pressure by that guy? Yes, it's super harsh because it's maybe a kneecap offside or something like that, one of those ones that I don't really like as an offside. But you can maybe, if in the VAR world, he's got that micro infraction of being offside, and then probably you can maybe give the refs a bit of slack on that one, albeit again it's not one that I particularly like. I mean, Simon, what did you make of both those decisions? Am I being kind to Boca or kind on the referees? What do you think?
I'm the referee. Do I have to get involved? No, for me, look, they're probably wrong decisions, marginal wrong decisions. It's for me, the remarkable thing is the almost like half of Argentina has suddenly decided that this is a conspiracy, and the whole world is against Boca, and once again CONMEBOL are cheating to help the Brazilians, when we also hear that the CONMEBOL are helping the Argentines to beat it doesn't make any sense. So for me, the decisions are probably both wrong, but they're not so wrong as to prove some mad plot against Boca Juniors. To see Riquelme go in the press and say, look, we've won 2 games and we lost. What's going on? They're cheating. They're so happy. So for me, like when I heard a lot of the backlash, because I wasn't watching that particular game live, I was like, this has got to be like the referees kicked into the back of the Boca Juniors net or something. And you see it and it's like, no, that's just a really poor South American refereeing decision. We get them every week. So I think they're probably both incorrect decisions, but they're not so incorrect as to justify a lot of the madness that's happened since, would be my position on this, I think.
Yeah, I think I'd share that as well, that in this second decision in particular, I didn't, it's like one of those marginal calls. So maybe, the reaction from Boca after the game is totally out of proportion. But then I can see that the injustice they feel comes from that on top of the first leg. And also, if you think of the style Boca have played under Russo, I mean, they qualified from the group only scoring 6 goals in 6 games. I think only Cerro scored less goals and got through. So they need these fine margins if they were ever going to get through this tie. The balance of these decisions had to go in their favor, and they must have felt they'd done their job a bit to what Tom was pointing to, that they managed to keep one of the highest scoring teams in the competition in Mineiro, not have them score a goal over 180 minutes. They must have been kind of feeling, we've pretty much done our bit, and it's the referees that have led us down on these fine calls. So that might be why they had such a reaction after the game. But I did think, just isolating that VAR decision in the second leg, it wasn't an awful one, especially not. We've just come off the back of international football, and we had in the Copa America, we had some, I think it was Colombia that were complaining. We had Uruguay in the World Cup qualifiers against Paraguay complaining about much worse decisions, in my opinion. So I think it might be on, adding up those two decisions from first and second leg, and then also just that fine margin. They really needed that to have a chance of getting through this tie, Boca.
Yeah, the cumulative effect of those two, I think, is definitely what led to that. And I mean, they even still had a chance in the penalties at the end there. It was quite a, it wasn't the best penalty shootout, it was quite entertaining, but probably for the wrong reasons. You had Hulge hitting the post early on, Rocco scoring, and if a few of those penalties had been a little bit better, I mean, Villa's penalty was right at Everson. That was awful. And especially when Hioran slipped on the turf and it bobbled up, it was like, it just felt like, oh, maybe after all this controversy, Boca might still get away with it. But that Izquierdos run up, oh my God, it was kind of like Simone Zaza, but over a much, much longer distance. And he absolutely skied it. And I thought it was quite nice that having saved a couple of penalties, Everson steps up for the fifth penalty there and put it in the absolute top corner. I thought that was, after quite a dour 2 games, it was nice to see a goalkeeper scoring the winner effectively. So yeah, that was a good aspect, and it does also mean as well that that's 2 consecutive years that Cuca has got the better of Russo, because obviously his Santos side put them out in the semi-finals last year, and yeah, he's becoming a bit of a bogeyman for Boca, really. So Boca now, they can focus on the league in Argentina, but I think they're going to have to isolate. There's been a big old controversy about that as well in the last few days, with lots of talk of and conspiracy theories about the presidents Tinelli and Lamens, who are ex San Lorenzo owners and board members and presidents there, being involved in trying to screw Boca out of having to play the reserves against their beloved San Lorenzo. So Boca feeling that injustice even after the Libertadores is finished, and yeah, it looks like they're going to have to play the kids for their next two games. So not a happy time in the blue and gold side of Buenos Aires right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be difficult when you're a fan of one of the biggest teams on the continent with infinite resources, and all of the footballing authorities are desperate to prevent you from playing all of the big games, because the last thing football authorities want is the most popular teams on television in the key games. That's not what they want. They want to do everything to prevent that. So you have to feel for Boca, absolutely. Talking about teams that you have to feel for, Ralph, what about Cerro Porteño, Fluminense? Obviously, we have the second leg coming up. But there was some more VAR drama in this one as well, Ralph.
Yeah, I was naming some of those bad VAR decisions just now, but I saved this one for now because I think this has been the worst VAR decision I've seen anywhere, which was in Cerro Porteño against Fluminense in the first leg. They scored. Boselli had a really good chance with a header, which was well saved, and about 5 minutes later, he gets the ball into the net, turns it in. And it's interesting because actually the assistant referee on the field flags for offside. But, the referee let the play run so he could score, then saw the offside flag, called it offside, but had the VAR check just in case. And VAR managed to draw a line showing that the player was marginally offside, Boselli. But what they'd done is somehow they totally forgotten to draw the line from the last defender, who was a fullback that on the near side of the screen that hadn't pushed up. So he was actually playing everybody on side by about 4 or 5 yards. And they just totally missed it. And actually, Chiqui Arce, the coach, in his press conference said that, on our phones, we were getting the messages to show that it was onside while they were still making the wrong VAR decision. So we just couldn't understand how they'd managed to take so long and still mess this up. It was, of course, a huge point of contention, but at the time it was 0-0. So I think Cerro went into halftime, still hoping they had a chance, but then Fluminense came out and made the best of the second half and got a 2-goal advantage. I don't know, maybe because it was the first leg, we didn't see the kind of reaction that Boca had against Mineiro post-game. There was a lot of complaints, but no kind of chasing the referees out the country or anything like that. But I think that's really cost Cerro, because it came at such a moment, with it being 0-0. They were not the best team. They just were having a good patch of play and they'd made it count, or they thought they'd made it count. But I think now, 2 goals, a 2-goal deficit, and to go to Brazil is going to be insurmountable for Serra in the second leg, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think that was probably the worst VAR decision yet. In terms of, we've had VAR for how many years, and that may be the worst one I've ever seen. And also, they released the footage of the VAR officials looking at the video, and they're kind of, you can see it on the screen behind them, and you go, look at that, look down, and then they go, okay, yeah, no, he's offside.
It's like a horror movie when the audience can see the killer behind you, and the protagonist has no idea. It's basically like that. Yeah, I mean, everybody can see it's on the screen there, and they're just looking at the wrong angle with all those angles that they have at their disposal.
Yeah, and you can he goes, no, you can see him telling the referee, no, okay, yeah, correct decision. And then there's a pause, and you can see them just looking at the screen, and you've got to think at least 2 or 3 of those guys are going, shit. Can we get him back on the phone? Let's just pretend that didn't happen. That was a tough one to take, undoubtedly. Tom, let's look at the next game. Barcelona-Vélez. So Vélez took a lead to Ecuador, but Barcelona came back. What were your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I thought this was always going to be a really interesting and closely fought tie. And I mean, obviously, shame to see Vélez go out, because I thought they've generally been one of the better Argentinian teams. They came through a tough group as well. But yeah, this Barcelona side is looking really strong and could be a dark horse to certainly get to the semi-finals, maybe even the final. First leg, a nice 1-0 win. It was really nice goal from Lucero, actually. It was kind of this glancing header as he was sort of backpedaling. I think quite a underrated kind of finish there to be able to get that power and direction on the header. And there was, to be honest, there was very few other chances in that first game. I definitely think Vélez was suffering from the fact that Almada and Francisco Ortega weren't with them, and as they're over in Japan at the Olympics, and also they hadn't, like all the Argentinian sides, hadn't had any league games to get them up to speed. You can see I'm putting in the the excuses already for why Argentina had such a mare in these games. But I think at that stage, a 1-0 win for Vélez in the first leg at home, good to have the advantage, but Barcelona weren't too upset of knowing that they just had to get on top in that second leg at home, and they always thought they had the chance. In the second game, a big 3-1 win for Barcelona. Really good counter-attacking goal from Adonis Preciado. The way that they broke so quickly, and nice hold-up play from Garces as well. I just thought that showed everything that Barcelona have been about. They know when to attack. They get forward in numbers and get forward quickly and use the ball very well. But then Vélez hit back. Another good header from Lucero. And at that stage, Vélez have got the away goal there. They're ahead in the tie, and you kind of think that they're doing pretty well here, but then it all kind of went wrong in later in the second half. Barcelona got a penalty. I thought it was quite a soft one, if I'm honest, but you could just see the naivety of the young defender Nazareno Romero. Only his second appearance, 21-year-old defender. He just got himself on the wrong side of Gabriel Cortés, and then Cortés picked himself up and sent the keeper the wrong way for the penalty. I did enjoy the fact that he's got El Gabi on the back of his shirt. I thought that was a nice little touch from Cortés, a player that we've admired for many years, albeit maybe one who maybe hasn't kicked on like we thought he might, but always going to be good at this level. And then even though Vélez are still in it at the moment, you just felt the momentum had shifted to Barcelona, and Jonathan Palasa came on. I think he'd just come on for Cortés as a sub, and a really nice finish. But again, it was really highly avoidable from Vélez's point of view. There was just a hopeful lump forward, and two defenders got in a muddle and kind of crashed into each other. Really good finish from Palasa from the edge of the area. But yeah, Vélez, I think, will feel that they could have probably seen this game out a little bit better. And I definitely think if Almada had been there, they would have a little bit more about them going forward as well. So credit to Barcelona. They've done really well. But yeah, shame for Vélez. And I think despite performances on the pitch going very well for them lately, there's quite a lot of, I think that's covering over a lot of the cracks about how the club's run at the moment. There's a lot of sort of murmurings behind the scenes from various fans about how the club's being run, and yeah, maybe we might see things sort of flare up a little bit now that they're out of the Libertadores. But certainly I'm looking forward to see Barcelona, and it's absolutely great that we've got not just Brazilians in the quarterfinals there, and good to have some representation from around South America with Barcelona.
Yeah, Barcelona are a team that always, as you say, plays very aggressive, assertive, counter-attacking, high-pressing football. Played a lot of pace, a lot of creativity. It's a team I enjoy watching, so I'm happy to see them in the next round. Ralph, what are your thoughts on Barcelona? Are you happy to see them there? What do you think? Do you think they can continue to have an impact in the next round of the competition?
Yeah, definitely happy to see them there. Like you guys have mentioned, they do play a nice brand of football, and similar to actually a lot of teams we see in Ecuador at the moment, they do still manage to kind of control possession, despite sometimes playing against bigger sides. They do try and impose themselves. So I think that's nice to see. I mean, I think if I'm right, they'd play the winner of the Cerro Fluminense tie. Cerro actually lost to them last year in the qualifiers, in the Libertadores qualifiers. They got beaten 4-0. So that could be interesting if by some miracle Cerro went through, because then they'd have a little revenge mission. But otherwise, we'd see them up against a Brazilian side. They've just knocked out an Argentinian side, so you never know. But they're fun to watch. I definitely enjoy watching Barcelona. And just a quick comment on Vélez, talking about that game management. I think I was just recapping the subs. They took off Brizuela and Mancuello when they were at 1-1. Both had a yellow card in the first half. So you almost had that feeling they felt they were through and were trying to protect some of their players in terms of bookings. And then, of course, we get the Cortés penalty and everything goes wrong. So, definitely some pointers there for coaching and game management, because it really was in their hands until midway through the second half.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think if they go through and play, even if it's Fluminense, they won't fear anyone. The way that Barcelona play, they never seem like the underdogs. Sometimes things come undone, but they'll definitely go toe-to-toe with anyone in the Libertadores, so that should be an interesting game. Another interesting game, although perhaps not as attacking, but they got the job done. Let's look at another Paraguayan success. Internacional Olimpia. Olimpia eventually make it through on penalties. Ralph, you have a Paraguayan team in the quarterfinal. Congratulations.
Yeah, I mean, once again, Olimpia have done it, which they've been doing, time and again in different generations. They often don't have the best team on paper, but they manage to dig in and pull out these results somehow from somewhere. I mean, in this particular tie, it was a repeat of the group stages where they'd lost 6-1 to Internacional in the group stages, then 1-0 in the home game, which was, I think, the fifth or sixth game of the group. This time, the first leg was at home. Olimpia ground out a 0-0 draw, but I think they were playing against really a quite poor Internacional side they'd rested a few players because they just had the Clásico before in Brazil, so they didn't come with a full strength side. They probably went back to Porto Alegre thinking, well, we're okay with 0-0. We'll feel we can win the home leg. But then in the second leg, what we saw was a kind of inspired performance from Olimpia's goalkeeper, Alfredo Aguilar, who's a 33-year-old goalkeeper, has never moved outside of Paraguay for whatever reason, never quite made it to the national team. He's often in the squad, but he's rarely a starter. There's always been kind of somebody just ahead of him. It was Roberto Fernandes for a bit. Now it's Anthony Silva. But, really good goalkeeper on his day. And he made about 3 or 4 saves in the first half that really kept them in it, because Internacional for this game have brought back Tyson. They brought back Thiago Gallardo. So, they had a much more kind of crisp attacking movement, I would say. They were moving the ball much quicker than they did in the first leg, and Olympia was struggling. Then in the second half of that game, Olympia made a change at halftime, which they kind of went to more a 4-5-1, which I think served them better for most of the half, but they did give away a penalty during that game, during that second half. And again, Aguilar was up to the task, making the save, a really good, one-handed save. He's kind of gone down low to his left, but kept his right hand high and managed to push the ball out. And then from there, you kind of felt that Internacional had knocked at the door so much they didn't know what to do next. And towards the end of the game, Olympia were definitely playing for penalties. And I think, they felt they were kind of in the ascendancy in the way they frustrated Internacional. And sure it went. I mean, in 1989, Olympia beat Internacional on penalties in Porto Alegre. And, history repeated itself here to the point that it was 5-4 on penalties in 1989 with the Brazilians missing their 4th penalty. The exact same thing happened this time. And they have a great penalty taker in terms of the fifth. The 5th penalty was Derlis Gonzalez. Derlis Gonzalez is a player that, for Paraguay, for the national team, he scored big penalties in shootouts against Brazil in the Copa America. I remember, I think he scored a really important one against Argentina in a World Cup qualifier as well. So that was the guy I think they wanted on that final penalty, and he delivered, and on they go. And, they're one of these teams that they're not brilliant, but they do seem to dig deep and find that spirit in those big games.
Yeah, with Eder Nilsson, who missed the penalty in normal time, when he scored in the shootout, he wasn't like happy or relieved that he'd scored the shootout penalty. He was like punching the floor, like, why didn't I do that in normal time? Then we wouldn't even be here. So it was an impressive performance from Olympia. Backs against the wall performance, but they got the job done, and against a strong team away in Brazil, a huge moment for them. So congratulations. Talking about 1989, who won the Libertadores in 1989? Atletico Nacional. I had to get a mention for a Colombian team in. That's as close as I'm going to get to a Colombian team.
It's the only mention you'll get in this podcast. But I was thinking as well, that decision to get rid of Miguel Angel Ramirez for Internacional just seems really silly now, doesn't it, Simon?
Yeah, well, you were calling him a bald forward, weren't you, a couple of weeks ago?
I was playing devil's advocate, all right? Don't lump me in with that, all right?
Yeah, it is a strange one. Obviously Internacional were on top for most of this game, but they didn't, penalty aside, and there was one, I think Tyson hit the post. They didn't have that many clear chances. They had a lot of attacking play, a lot of the ball, but they weren't a team, I don't know, they didn't quite cut open Olympia as much as perhaps they would have hoped to at home with the quality they have. But respect to Olympia, they got the job done. Let's move on to another team that very much got the job done. Tom, Flamengo, Defensa Justicia, 4-1. Was it as comfortable as it looks on paper? Obviously, Flamengo got the early goal. Defensa Justicia came back into it, and then towards the end, Flamengo ran away. Is it one of those games where the result perhaps flatters Flamengo, or were they always kind of on the cards of getting a few in this one?
So yes and no, because certainly the scoreline I think does flatter Flamengo a little bit, because they put a late flurry on when the game was gone, just to put a little bit of extra gloss on the result. But they were well worth the victory, and I thought they were comfortable for most of it, even if they were maybe at times the scoreline and the result was a little bit closer than maybe they'd like. But this defensive side were always going to be underdogs, and having lost 3 or 4 of their key players as well, which I'm sure we'll get onto in a bit when we discuss River, seeing as they've got 2 of their best ones. It meant that defence are always going to be up against it, and they did all right in that first game. 1-0 loss at home. Flamengo managing to get that goal through Michael, deflected long range strike. But again, like you look at defence, that goal was pretty avoidable. I'm not a huge fan of Unsain, their goalkeeper. I think he's mainly in there because he's good with his distribution, and this goal came about because he did a poor kick out and immediately had Defensa on the back foot. So, Defensa going into the game 1-0 down, Flamengo with the away goal. I think it was always going to be tough. And then with Rodrigo Caio scoring a thumping header pretty early on, it felt like it was only going to be one-way traffic. And the only reason why Defensa got back into the game was, Flamengo were dominating, but they got a bit too cocky. Goalkeepers lacked clearance, was just closed down by Loisa into the empty net. So suddenly Defensa were like, oh, wait a minute, maybe we can get back into this game. But then loads of Flamengo pressure came, and Derrasqueta scored, did well actually, because there was initial volley off the post and he had to really control the header to make it go in, because it was coming at quite a pace, so he could have quite easily missed that, and then Vitinho with 2 at the end just to put the game to bed. But I think we're always going to expect Flamengo to win. They've got so much firepower, and certainly Derrasqueta was looking on song, and they're going to be a tough team to beat. Defensa, They've had a tough route, and the fact they've got out of the group stage, I think they can take as progress. And they're never going to be one of the big Argentinian teams, but the fact that they're now getting to knockout stage of the Libertadores shows just how far they've come.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a couple of years ago, it's a team I'd never heard of, and now it's a team I expect to be in the Libertadores and expect to be doing well. I know what their style of play is kind of generally about, so they have invaded my consciousness in a good way. Congratulations. But no, definitely lots of positive news for Defensa Justicia, even if they didn't make it through this time. Ralph, Flamengo, are they amongst the favourites for you? Again, things are looking pretty good. Obviously, a great squad. Any concerns about Flamengo? Do you think that they're going to be there or thereabouts?
Yeah, I think their only concern is that the next game they have, or the next tie, is against Olimpia, who they've actually never beaten in the Libertadores. So that could be, the thorn in their side. But otherwise, it's a very strong team, kind of through the lines. And I mean, we see with all the Brazilian sides, I think, we're seeing there's been this gap developing economically over maybe the last 4 or 5 years, and probably without Boca or River, it could have been huge dominance from Brazilian sides for a while. So they're definitely in there. You've got to think, them along with Atletico Mineiro, who've already talked about, and maybe somebody like Palmeiras. They're probably your top 3 from Brazil in this tournament.
Yeah, I think with Brazilian sides now, if one of these big Brazilian teams doesn't get to the quarterfinal, semi-final, then it's probably down to the manager, probably down to the system, because the quality's there, It's interesting. But yeah, if Brazilian teams start playing to their potential and have the same tactical level as some of the strongest sides across the continent, then they're going to be there or thereabouts. However, look, we've got a Paraguayan team, we've got an Ecuadorian team, maybe another Paraguayan team. So all is not lost. This CI Copa. This isn't just the Copa Brasil still. And we even have 2 Argentine teams playing each other, which brings us on to River Argentinos. Argentinos, a very creditable performance, no, Tom, to get this far in the competition.
Yeah, 100%. I think we all looked at them as the weakest of the Argentinian sides. Albeit maybe not in the most difficult group, but again, one that I thought they would struggle to find the quality to get ahead of their opponents in that group. But yeah, they did very well. They came out of the blocks really quickly, and getting to the knockouts for them again, you can see that as a success. And they took River all the way. But at least I have one Argentinian side to back and represent in the latter stages. And I think we all, again, it was one of those results where you thought River should always prevail. First game, 1-1 draw. A lot of players coming back from the Copa America without much rest, and it was the speed of the game was quite affected by quite a sort of waterlogged pitch. It wasn't too bad, but it was slow and kind of saturated, and meant the ball didn't zip around quite as much as you'd want. Suarez got a goal, Auche got the equaliser, and then nothing really happened in the second half. So it was all set up for quite a tight move, but tight second leg, to be honest. But then we saw Gallardo switch to more of a 4-4-2 for the second leg. I think he'd seen the way Argentinos play, decided to go a bit more direct, and it paid off for him. With new signing, Brian Romero, who just loves to score in continental competition, getting 2 goals to send River through. I think maybe there's a discussion to be had as the fairness of River being able to poach Defensio Justicia's best player and bring him into the side to replace Borré. In other competitions, you'd expect him to be cup tied, but this is the Libertadores. Things work a little bit differently. Took both of his goals really well. The first one was quite a route one attack from River, which kind of showed that more direct style they went for in this leg, and was a bit lucky that Quintana slipped over, but it was a really, really good long range drive to finish it off. And then the second one, that Suarez managed to get through and squared it to Romero, who again on the stretch just about turned it in. Really impressive from the new signing, and I think he's going to fill the boots of Borré quite well. And they've also got Enzo Fernandez back at River after his time at Defensio Justicia. So they've strengthened the squad quite nicely. I think River, they've got a solid team. They know how they're playing. They've got a great manager. So I think River, certainly they're going to give everyone a run for their money, and if we saw them in the semis or even the final, if they get fortunate, then it wouldn't be a massive surprise. So a good result, River march on.
Yeah, to bring Palavecino, Julian Alvarez, and Enzo Fernandez off the bench is pretty exciting. How do you think, or how has Romero coming in for Borré changed the way they attack? Because Romero, for me, and feel free to correct me, is more kind of a target man, a penalty area striker, whereas Borré is very dynamic, pressing, lots of movement. Do you think this is going to help the team evolve? Is this going to change the way that they play? Obviously, the likes of Julian Alvarez can play that kind of more dynamic role. How do you think Romero is changing River's attacking approach?
Yeah, I think he won't necessarily need to change their attack too much, because he's going to be that main kind of focus point, maybe a bit more than Borré was. With Borré, Suarez and Alvarez, there was so much interchanging, and like you said, so much great pressing from the front, so much great movement to allow others to come in. We might see that maybe they're going to service Romero more and really direct more of those final touches towards him. But because you've got some great support players there in Suarez, in even Carrascal had an all right game there. You've got De La Cruz, lots of attacking players, Alvarez obviously as well. So I think it might mean they go a little bit more direct, and I think maybe we'll be seeing Romero on the end of the goals rather than everyone sort of sharing them out a bit. But Borré was one of the top scorers in the Copa de la Liga, so it's not like he wasn't contributing goals. yes, Romero's not going to give you quite as much movement up front, but they've got so many players around him who can do that. So I don't think it's going to change things too much. I think it's a really savvy signing, and I mean it's been a great start. But we'll see if he can get anywhere near replicating what Borre's done for River. Then it will be it'll be a fantastic signing.
Yeah, perhaps you have Romero as kind of the focal point striker, and then everyone else playing off him, whether they be attacking number 10s, which River have got a load of at the moment, or kind of more floating support strikers like Alvarez. Interesting. Ralph, what do you think of River? Are they one to watch for you in this competition still?
Yeah, I think always a candidate with what they've done in the last few years, and picking up on the Romero signing. I mean, Brian Romero has a great record in continental competitions. I think he's does better in these competitions than he does in league football for whatever reason, whether it's a big game player or it's having that kind of that style of striker you were talking about there, somebody that you can sort of center the team around in terms of attacking play, have a focal point and on the end of things. It definitely reaped rewards for him with Defensa y Justicia, and now got off to a great start with River, and in a way it also shows us that River Plate have some of that tactical flexibility when they need it, because when this tie was drawn, it was probably one of the ones they least favoured, having to play a team that they know each other, that's from their league, because they were maybe expecting more of that kind of tight game that we saw in the first leg, knowing that Argentinos and Gabi Milito would maybe know how to try and cancel them out better than other sides. So I think they'll be happy they got through this, and definitely pleased with the performance in the second leg.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, Tom, well, let's look at the next one. We've got Racing against Sao Paulo. This was an interesting one. Sao Paulo, perhaps a little bit of a surprise with their two new strikers, or their two striking options, who really, for me, were kind of key to everything they did. Marquinhos and Emiliano Rigoni. Those, for me, were kind of perhaps the difference in this tie. What did you think of this one? Racing going out. What did you think of this game?
Yeah, I think initially it wasn't necessarily one that caught the eye, because they played each other in the group stage, and neither of those games were that interesting. Racing kind of got the better of the two in the group stages, but yeah, Sao Paulo coming up with a win when it mattered most, and I think for all the talk of how Racing did well in the Copa de la Liga, getting to the final there and having a better group stage than maybe we envisaged, I think this was that limited Racing side at the start of the tournament that we'd said isn't anything to shout about, getting found out by a good but not a brilliant Brazilian side. I mean, it was close in the first leg. It was 1-1, a really uncharacteristic error from Arias to allow Vitor Bueno to score. But then Enzo Copetti got a lovely equaliser just before half time, and there was even a huge miss from Eugenio Mena as well, which I think, had he scored that, we might have looked at a bit of a different tie. But as you rightly said, it was all about Rigoni and Marquinhos coming in, really making an impact. So you've got to credit Crespo for bringing those two guys in, especially when Marquinhos, who I think it was his first start, he's just 18 years old. So imagine what a huge ask that was to make your first competitive start for a huge club like Sao Paulo when the stakes are so high. And he was brilliant. I was so impressed with him. That first goal that they scored came from a really, really good run in behind the defence. He really showed his pace there, hit the post, and Rigoni was on hand to turn in the rebound. And then just after half time, he got through nicely and just showed his composure to finish really well. And then laid on the assist for the third goal that really killed off the game. So yeah, really, really impressive performance from him. Racing got one back, but it didn't really matter too much. And yeah, Rigoni and Benitez, two guys who used to play for Independiente, sticking the knife in to Racing. I'm sure they will have enjoyed that victory. So yeah, Sao Paulo get through. I don't think we're necessarily going to see them bother the latter stages of this tournament, but they've got a good manager, they've got a good solid squad, some exciting youngsters coming through. Clearly, they could potentially surprise some teams, and I don't think anyone's really going to look forward to playing against them. So, yeah, still, I'm yet to see them come up against a really, really tough proposition, which I think we will see in the quarterfinals. And I think that'll be the true making of what this Sao Paulo side could potentially go on to achieve. Are they just going to be there making up the numbers, or are they really here for the long haul to make a real dent in this competition?
Yeah, Ralph, when we were talking about Brazilian teams, we mentioned Mineiro, we mentioned Palmeiras, we mentioned Flamengo. We didn't mention Sao Paulo. Should we be mentioning Sao Paulo? Obviously, they're through to the quarterfinals. They've made it look fairly comfortable so far. Perhaps they haven't faced the strongest of opposition. And obviously, bringing in some of these young guys, maybe they're not as seasoned or proven as some of the guys at Flamengo, for example. But they do obviously have a lot of experience there, for example, in defense, Arboleda, Miranda. What do you think of Sao Paulo and their chances?
Yeah, they're a bit of an enigma, I think. The reason maybe we didn't mention them at first is because they're sort of in or around the relegation zone in the Brasileirão at the moment. So they hadn't been playing brilliantly in this sort of off season since qualifying from the group. But then they put in this kind of performance, and actually I think they picked up a win recently in the league, which had been a while coming. So you kind of don't know what to make of them, and there's definitely enough talent there. Like we're talking about the young players that he brought in, like Marquinhos. He was using a Paraguayan a bit in the group games against Racing. I remember he played Antonio Galeano, who's a Paraguayan that joined, also a youngster, but he's kind of got enough talent at his disposal, Crespo, to kind of solve the problems that he's obviously been having in the league. So it's hard to count out. But then I don't think I put them up there with your Flamengo, Atletico Mineiro, and Palmeiras, just because based on league form, you kind of think maybe those teams have got a bit more to them. The only thing that I suppose they do really have on their side also is Crespo himself, having gone the distance in a continental competition last season. So maybe there's something he's got there that he can start to put to use in these later stages of the Libertadores.
We will have to see. Well, a team that we always seem to expect to be there or thereabouts, a team that often we kind of expect to be a little bit workmanlike. At times they've surprised us and stepped things up. They got the job done professionally against in their last game as well. They got the job done professionally. Let me say that again, because I forgot who I'm talking about. Católica, all these fucking Chilean teams. All right. Well, absolutely. And the other team, the final game from this round, includes a Brazilian team who we always expect to be there or thereabouts. At times, they're workmanlike, professional, a little bit dirty at times. They get the job done usually, but they professional job, I would say, against Universidad Católica. Tom, how did you see this one? Is this a workmanlike, no nonsense Palmeiras? Is this a slightly more fun, expressive Palmeiras? What kind of Palmeiras are we looking at as they go into the quarterfinal?
Yeah, I think they have the potential to be a bit more fun than maybe they're currently playing. They kind of remind me a little bit of the Brazil national team in so much as they're very impressive. They control the game very well. It felt a pretty straightforward win for them in both games, albeit they didn't really have to get out of third gear to beat a Católica side that I'm not going to say they laid over for, rolled over for them, but they didn't put up the biggest fight, I don't think. So yeah, you've got this really impressive team, but sometimes they're the last ones you end up discussing because there's not always the same amount of interest. But to be fair, especially in that second leg, they had so many chances. Davison had some really, really big chances, and it was just the keeper Perez who was making just a load of good saves from him, from Wesley as well. But yeah, they finally got their breakthrough through Marcus Rocha. Shot off the post kind of fell to him. Don't know where the marking was really. Católica were all over the place, and he didn't really strike it that cleanly. So it's almost one of those ones that because the shot doesn't come at you as quickly as you're expecting, you almost dive past it. So I kind of going to cut the keeper a bit of slack there because he had a really good game. I think he was expecting a cleaner contact and maybe he would have been in line with it when when it was actually there, but kind of bobbled past him. So yeah, solid win, and also you've got to think this is a side that had Gabriel Veron, Dudu, Lucas Lima, Patrick de Paula, Viña, all on the bench for this game. And also, not to mention, Borja, Luis Adriano, Ronnie. Like, this is a team stacked with talent. And in terms of depth, there's not too many that can compete with them. And I think, okay, yeah, this was just getting the job done, getting through to the next round. And now they're going to come up with a big task against Sao Paulo, but this is definitely a side that should be, making the semi-finals kind of their minimum goal, I think, for the Libertadores. They've got a very good manager, again, maybe one that doesn't want to let them off the leash too much, but it's a good Palmeiras side, and I think hopefully we'll not see them go as pragmatic as they did in last year's run to the title, when they kind of were a bit too worried about the result. Maybe now they've got that win, they can let loose a little bit more and try and go for it in style. Who knows? I've got my fingers crossed.
Yeah, wow, that substitutes bench is ridiculous. Willian as well. Wow, that is insane. I literally think that their substitute bench could get to the Libertadores semi-final. Ralph, any Palmeiras substitutes you wouldn't take in the Olympia starting 11?
Yeah, I think they'd all walk into that team pretty much. I mean, one thing is that they're on a really good run in the league as well. I think they've won 8 in all competitions. They've kept 5 clean sheets in their last 6. I was looking at. So I mean, it's just such a strong team across the board. But it was funny that they ended up, winning these two legs 1-0, having been the side that scored the most goals in the group stages. They managed 20 goals in the group stages. So it does seem to be quite similar to last year when we saw them get into this really kind of pragmatic and attritional style in the knockout stages. So, but I'll share Tom's optimism that hopefully we get something a bit more exciting this year.
Yeah, lots and lots of talent. So, guys, we're going to come and look at the quarterfinals of Libertadores in a moment and give our quick predictions. No time for thinking, just instinctive. But very quickly, before we do, the Copa Sudamericana is also now coming up to the quarterfinal stage. So let's go through the quarterfinals and see who we think are our favourites, who do we think is going to win, what's kind of been their story to get this far. So first of all, Tom, Rosario Central, so they qualify with a win against Deportivo Táchira. How are Rosario Central doing in the Argentine League? What are they like? They're playing against Bragantino of Brazil, which is obviously a pretty strong team. They got to this quarterfinal with a win over Independiente del Valle, so they're good. Tom, what are your thoughts on this game?
Well, I would say that I would fully expect Bragantino to win this game. Rosario Central have done well to get this far. They've been putting a load of faith in their kids in the last 2 Copas. As to how they're doing in the local league, the league's only just started, so they've had 1 game. They lost to Godoy Cruz, which isn't a great start, but I think all that was because they were focusing on the Sudamericana. So generally speaking, it is a side that I really like. I mentioned, Kili Gonzalez putting faith in a lot of the kids there, and they've got some really, really good young players coming through. One of my favourite players for them is Vijagra, really nice defensive midfielder. Luciano Ferreira, really promising 19-year-old who's just making his first way into the squad, and Gaston Avila, who they've got on loan from Boca, really good centre back as well. So lots of, I think the most intriguing thing about this Rosario side is just those young players coming through. But yeah, like I said, I've been really impressed with Bragantino, the way they've shot up through the Brazilian leagues and divisions, and obviously they've got that backing behind them, and with obviously a couple of players over at the Olympics. I think Claudinho, the big one, which will be a miss if he's not back in time. But Artur, Ramirez, they've even signed Praxedes from Internacional, which is a real big statement, taking one of the best young players from that Internacional side and bringing him across to Bragantino. So I think, they're a side that are going places, and I would fully expect them to get through against Rosario Central.
Okay, Ralph, any objections to that? I mean, Bragantino for me look very interesting. Do you think Rosario could do it?
Well, based on what I saw of Rosario in the group stages when they couldn't beat Paraguay's 12 de Octubre, I think it's fair to go with Bragantino in this one. I think, again, with the Brazilian sides in Sudamericana, it's maybe slightly different to Libertadores, that they're not always fully focused on this competition. I don't think they hold it in the same regard. But that said, I think Bragantino would have enough in this one.
Okay, and what about LDU Quito? So this is a team that just knocked out Gremio. Incredible. They beat them away in Brazil. Huge result for LDU Quito. They're going to be going up against Atlético Paranaense, another Brazilian side who were very, very impressive. They destroyed América de Cali 4-1. Cali were unable to register some of their players, which was, kind of their excuse, but it was a very comprehensive win. So these are kind of two strong teams in good form. LDU, again, very dynamic team. Ralph, I'll start with you. What do you think of this tie? Paranaense, LDU, Quito. Who do you fancy?
Yeah, this is a nice one. I also kind of like how Liga de Quito are playing as well. So I think maybe with the altitude on their side, they might be able to squeeze through this one, but I think it'll be a very, very well balanced tie for sure.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a really good game. Tom, what are your thoughts on this one? Paranaense, LDU Quito.
Yeah, I would say Quito would be my favourites as well. That they were in a tough group in the Libertadores, and if a few things had gone their way, that they could have easily made it out of that group. So yeah, I would expect them to win, but I don't think we can read maybe too much into their victory over Gremio, because Gremio are having a shocking time in the league at the moment. They've lost their manager. He's gone to Flamengo now as well. So it wasn't the same Gremio side that we saw in the group stages where they smashed their way through. I think that maybe it's just something to bear in mind without going too much hype on LDU Quito, but I would still have them as narrow favourites.
Okay, well we'll come to the all Uruguay clash in a second, but we've also got Libertad against Santos. I would say two teams, big teams, who aren't in the best of form. Libertad got through on away goals against Junior. Junior won the second leg 1-0, but they needed two because they lost 4-3 at home. And I think all of the goals were pretty much terrible defensive mistakes. Whereas Santos made it through narrowly against Independiente, thanks to a goal from Caio Jorge, a nice little deft finish in that one. Ralph, am I being a bit harsh on Libertad, or were they not that good against the slightly depleted Junior side?
Well, I think they, surprisingly in a way, they weren't that good in the first leg, or I thought the way they played that first leg was really high risks and trying to go toe to toe, but they were maybe lucky that Junior were doing the same thing and then had a couple of those awful defensive mistakes that you mentioned, and that meant they scored the 4 away goals. In this second leg, Libertad, were happy to play without the ball. They would try, they were waiting to see what Junior would try and do and come onto them. And actually, Junior were very cautious themselves because Libertad have such good attacking talent in terms of counter attacking. They have Tito Villalba, they have the 17-year-old Julio Enciso, who's very quick, very dangerous. They brought off the bench Lorenzo Melgarejo, who they've just picked up from Racing. And then they had, someone like Chelo Diaz, who they've also signed, was just kind of marshalling the midfield and holding there. So they do have a very strong team, Libertad. But what we've always seen with the coach, Daniel Garnero, is he's always struggled in continental competitions when he has had a good squad with Olimpia. So that, I think in terms of it could be a tactical battle with Santos. But on paper, Libertad have a good enough side to kind of go head-to-head with them. But I'm not sure if they'll be able to win out tactically over two legs.
Yeah, it should be interesting. Yeah, you're right, actually. I mean, I suppose, to be honest, Junior's goal came quite late, and it always looked as though Libertad probably had that one in the bag for most of the second half. Junior needing 2 goals and not producing too much until that excellent strike from Gonzalez. Tom, what about Santos? They weren't very good in this year's Libertadores. Are they? Do you reckon they could win the Sudamericana?
I don't think so. I think there's just too many better sides than them. This is a game that I think is fairly 50-50, could go either way. I'm looking forward to seeing, the battle of the 17-year-olds, Kaiki Miller versus Julio Enciso. I think that'll be a reason to watch this game. But no, I think I think certainly Bragantino I would have as stronger than them, and probably LDU Quito as well. So it's a very Jekyll and Hyde kind of Santos side. So I'm not holding up too much hopes for them, but they've got some interesting players there at least.
Okay, Tom, I'll stay with you because we have one final game in the quarterfinal, which will be Peñarol against Sporting Cristal. Sporting Cristal progressed against Arsenal Sarandí of Argentina, 1-1 in the second leg to go through, whereas Peñarol faced Nacional in a huge game. What went down in that one, Tom?
Oh, what didn't go down? It was, it was over the 2 legs. It was a really fascinating watch. I mean, the second leg ended with a really late injury time goal for Nacional. I think the 11th minute of injury time. Guzman Coruja from Brian Ocampo assist, and a couple of 3 red cards in injury time. So just what you'd expect from the Uruguayan Clásico there. But I think the better side is probably just about scraped through. Peñarol have been on really good form in this competition, and I'm a huge fan of their striker Agustín Álvarez Martínez, El Canario. He's been in great form. I think he's got 8 goals in 9 or 10 games for them, and he's really exciting young striker to keep an eye on. So I think he will give them the edge, along with Facundo Torres, who was so impressive in the Copa America. His sort of cameos off the bench for Uruguay were one of the better aspects of their competition. I've just not been impressed at all by Sporting Cristal. They've been so wasteful in the Libertadores, and if you're edging Arsenal de Sarandí, who've been awful in Argentina for a while now, then I really don't have too much hope for them. So I'm hoping Peñarol can finally have a bit of continental success, because it's been a pretty miserable decade for them ever since the 2011 Libertadores run. It's they've basically never made it out of the group stage since then of the Libertadores. So it's good for them to have a bit of a run, and I like them as a side that could certainly get to the semis, and maybe even a bit further. Okay, perfect. Sounds good. All right. Well, here it comes, the moment you've been waiting for, where we find out who's going to win the quarterfinals of the Copa Libertadores. So, guys, first of all, Fluminense Cerro. Ralph,
Are Cerro going to come back, or do you expect Fluminense to make it through? The game's going to be played on Tuesday, so this probably will come out before this game, so we can wait and find out the result. But Ralph, Fluminense Cerro, do you expect Fluminense to get the job done at home?
Yeah, unfortunately, although I'd like Cerro to make it, I think Fluminense have got too much in the bank with that 2-goal lead.
Okay, cool. Tom, any objections to that, Fluminense going through?
No objections at all. Hopefully they'll have a better VAR team in this time.
Okay, cool. Well, maybe they'll get some VAR help. Maybe they'll overcompensate and give them a couple of goals. We'll see. Okay, so quarterfinals. Sao Paulo, Palmeiras, 10th of August, my brother's birthday. Who's going to win? Ralph, Flamengo, Palmeiras, or Sao Paulo?
Palmeiras.
Okay, cool. Tom, Palmeiras, Sao Paulo?
Palmeiras, they're going to get through that banner that flies that says Porks is going to be fluttering in the wind as they get a victory there.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think Palmeiras, even a Palmeiras second 11 would give them a decent game. But as well as the quality they have, I just think they just manage games so well. Felipe Melo at the back, yeah, getting stuck in. I think Palmeiras probably are the favourites for that one. Here we go, Ralph. Here's your chance to dream. Olimpia against Flamengo. Huge game, huge tie. Can Olimpia defend their way through 180 minutes? Will they try and attack? What's going to happen in this one?
I'm actually going to say I think Olimpia are going to squeeze through it just because there's no reason they should, but that was the same against Inter. And Flamengo have that strange history of never managing to beat them in Libertadores, 6 games and counting. So I think Olimpia probably on penalties again.
Okay, that's going to be an exciting one, or maybe not an exciting one. Maybe not a load of attacking football from Olimpia, but they've done it before. Tom, do you share Ralph's optimism?
Well, I'm not sure I share it, but I certainly hope it happens. But I'm going to play it safe and boring and say Flamengo. Sorry. Okay, fair enough. I've been convinced. I'm going Olympia. I'm on Team Olympia. We can do it. Let's go. All right, nice. Well, what about this one, Tom? River Mineiro. I like Mineiro. Savarino, Hulk. I think they're good. Obviously, failing to score in the previous game against Boca. Perhaps a slight concern, conceding potentially. Let's not open that one again. But potentially conceding a couple of goals in those ties as well, although they were ruled out. But I like Mineiro. Tom, who's going to win, River or Mineiro? Yeah, I'm quite conflicted here. I thought Atletico would have done better against Boca, which is making me lean towards River, and because I'm representing my Argentinian boys, part of me thinks I should go for it, but. Having said that, I'm going to U-turn it back and go back to Atletico Mineiro because I think that they won't be coming up against quite a stubborn defence. And I think Nacho Fernandez is, through tears streaming down his face, going to put out his former side.
Okay, nice. Yeah, I just think Savarino on the counter, Hulk, would be interesting. Ralph, what do you think? River Plate or Atletico Mineiro?
Similar conflicts to Tom here. I think it's a really hard one to call. But I do think, and I'm also thinking back to that Palmeiras River last year. I think maybe the fact that River aren't going to be as strong defensively as Boca were, and then looking at Atletico Mineiro are very strong defensively. They've also got ex-Boca defender Junior Alonso in there, the Paraguayan. I think Atletico Mineiro will have just enough to get through.
Okay, well, we can talk about the crisis in Argentine football with no Argentines in the semi-final. And finally, we've said Fluminense are going to beat Cerro. So, Fluminense or Barcelona, Tom? Who are you going for?
Barcelona. I think they're going to go all the way to the final.
Oh, okay, nice. A victory for football. Ralph, what about you? Fluminense or Barcelona?
Yeah, I don't think Barcelona would get all the way to the final, but I think they've got a great chance here against, probably the weakest Brazilian side left in the competition. So I think Barcelona could definitely do a job there.
Okay, well, we may have. Ralph believes we're going to have 2 non-Brazilians in the semi-final. There we go, and nobody seems to think we'll have any Argentines. So the times are changing. Paraguay is the new number 2 in South America. Congratulations. We'll see what happens. Guys, thank you for listening. We will be back for the quarterfinals. It's been a bit of a crazy few weeks, but I'm hoping we can do a show rounding up the first leg. If not, we'll be there to round up the ties and look ahead and see how correct we were with our wonderful predictions. So thanks, Tom. Thanks, Ralph. Tom, anything you'd like to plug, point people towards the wonderful Golasso podcast, perhaps?
Yeah, certainly. If you check me out on Twitter at TomRob89, then have a look at those Golasso Argentina podcasts celebrating the Argentina victory in the Copa America. That was an enjoyable one to record, and we've got a few bits on World Football Index of some young Argentinians to watch, and there'll also be a piece coming out on Y Scout relatively soon about the aforementioned Agustin Alvarez Martinez. So check that out too.
Perfect. And Ralph, anything you'd like to point people towards or say before we finish up today?
Sure. I mean, you can find me on Twitter at Paraguay Ralph, and that's where I kind of post some of the stuff I'm doing, which includes Guarani Vision podcast, which is a podcast on Paraguayan football in English. So going into a bit more detail on some of those, Olimpia and Cerro Porteño, amongst other things. And then also I'm also always posting links to my blog where I do a lot of previews on local league games and some of these international games as well.
Perfect. So you can follow me on Twitter at Simon Edwards SAF. I think I might be doing a preview of the quarterfinals. So if you want to hear, read some written work, you can check that out. Also, guys, go and follow FootVay English. They do amazing work. They've just had their 1-year anniversary. It's really helped me get into Venezuelan football and understand a growing league, loads of young players over there. So give them a little plug as well, because they've done 1 year of really excellent work, and go give them a follow. Tell them I sent you. You don't have to do that. Doesn't matter. But go check them out. Give them a follow. And guys, thanks for listening. Thanks for joining us this week. We shall be back again soon with the Copa Libertadores continuing. So thanks for listening and goodbye.